Hi everyone, welcome to this podcast looking at an essay on Curley's wife. The title for this is Discuss the Presentation of Curley's Wife in John Steinbeck's Of Mice and Men, and suggesting she's solely to blame for the tragedies of a novella. So novella is just a posh word for short novel. So basically we can look at all aspects of Curley's wife, put them into a controlled assessment hopefully to get an A. If you want to look how to do the point evidence explained, I will embed this into the video now. If you know about the PEEs and you just want to look at an A-star essay, just forward on 5 minutes or so and you'll get to that.
So if you follow this structure, you're going to be on the road to success. Obviously, we don't just want to stick with PEE. We want to elaborate and go into more detail, but this is the basic structure of PEE. So you've got your point, which is basically should be one sentence or a little bit more than one sentence, and all you're doing is making a simple point based on the question. So Curley is an aggressive character. Your evidence, which you should embed into the sentence, Curley lashed his body around. So I've used this quote to prove my point that Curley is aggressive, and then all I'm doing in my explanation is basically describing or analysing why Curley lashed his body around, why that portrays Curley as aggressive. So if you did that, that's sort of PE, you'd be looking at a C all the way through. Obviously, maybe a low C, we'd want a bit more detail, but that sort of structure would get you a low C perhaps. However, if you didn't do it all the way through correctly, or you made some mistakes, or you didn't do enough, you're going to be maybe playing with the fact that you might be on the CD borderline, and we want to make sure that people are at least getting Cs. So there's a couple of ways to improve the paragraph. One of the ways is by zooming in on a word in the quotation. So this means I look at my quotation, Curley lashed his body around, and I look at any words and think, well, what can I say? How do they prove my point? So for example, in this paragraph, we could look at the word lashed. John Steinbeck could have just said, Curley moved his body around. However, the use of the word lashed, the verb, makes it sound like a violent and aggressive action. So that's why Curley is an aggressive character, my point. The other way is to talk about 1930s America or context. You might not be able to talk about 1930s America in every single paragraph, but you should be able to do it in most. Then, nigger, I could get you strung up on a tree so easy it ain't even funny. So I've got my point, I've got my evidence, I've just got to write my explanation. So like I said before, the first part of the explanation is just saying why that quote proves she's cruel. And basically it's cruel because she's threatening to get him lynched and killed. So she's saying to Crooks, if you don't keep your mouth shut, keep your place, I will get you killed. So it's a pretty horrendous thing to someone to say something. So how do we improve this? So we zoom in. So one phrase we could zoom in is your place. So why is John Steinbeck saying that? So we could say it's because she's telling Crooks to keep his place on the ranch at the bottom, and also a black person's place in society at the bottom. We could also zoom in on the N-word. So although this was commonplace in 1930s America, we could definitely maybe comment on the fact that it's still meant as an insult. And we could also zoom in on so easy. So we could maybe comment on the fact that it wouldn't be a hard thing for her to get him lynched. She could literally do it as easy as clicking her fingers. Then we could talk about 1930s, explain what lynching was and how it was commonplace. And we could also talk about how maybe women were bullied in the 1930s, so maybe that's why she's bullying the other characters. We could also talk about Crooks, the 1930s, the place of the black man in 1930s American society. So one bit of a trick that I've told my students to do perhaps in the controlled assessment is almost set your workout like I'm just going to set out here, and then just before you print out, take away the subheadings. So my point is Curley's wife shows her cruel side in chapter 4. My evidence is the one I've already said. My explanation is Curley's wife is suggesting she will get Crooks lynched if he continues talking to her. My zoom in, the so easy phrasing makes it sound like she can make it happen as easily as breathing in and out, while the keep your place suggests she wants him never to get his place in society and the ranch as a black man. She also calls him a nigger, and while this might not be considered racist in 1930s America, we sense she's using it as an insult. So to finish the paragraph, we're going to talk about context. In the 1930s, black men would have been hanged from a tree if they were accused of a crime. There would have been no judge or jury, but they would have just been killed on a white person's accusation. They were hanged from a tree as a punishment, as a warning to other people. So all I've done in that paragraph is I've gone through each of these numbers here, all the zoom in, all the explanation, and basically I've just done one sentence for each one. So although this paragraph might look scary, all it is for one sentence for each of the things I've said. And then what you do is at the end of your controlled assessment, before you print it out, you would just take away all the subheadings and it would end up something like that. A really good A star or A grade PEE paragraph.
So, quick intro. Throughout the story of Mice and Men, our perception of the character Curley's wife evolves. At the start, Curley's wife is portrayed in a negative way. For examples, a flirt who wears lots of makeup. Throughout the story, we're given different views of her, some of which leads us to perceive her differently than first thought, while also giving the reader a snapshot of 1930s America. So quickly, an intro. I'm not going into too many reasons or explanations or analysis of Curley's wife. I'm just doing a short intro, basically saying what I'm going to say in my article. However, one thing I have told the examiner or the marker of this essay straight away is that I know that I'm going to refer to 1930s. So again, to get good grades, you've got to refer to context, and I've done that straight away in my intro. You'll notice as we go through the essay that I've underlined the first sentence. The reason I've done that is that I want you to, when you do your point evidence explain, to make your point very simple and very clear. Where people tend to go wrong in some of these essays is that their point evidence and explanation, it all gets muddled up and it's quite unclear for the reader to see where the writer is going with their point. So I've just, in this essay on this video, I've put a simple point and I've underlined it just to clarify and just to show you how simple it is. So my first one is Curley's wife is never given a name throughout the story. So I'm sure you've talked about this in your lessons, about the fact she doesn't have a name. So simple point, Curley's wife is never given a name throughout the story. This shows the character is treated as a possession and is simply known as Curley's wife. This shows a huge lack of respect for her, as nobody once calls her with her own name. It's as though her identity had been taken away and she has no right to stand up as a person with right and opinion. Steinbeck makes the reader feel sympathy for her as we feel sorry for her as she's neglected and overlooked. The apostrophe in Curley's wife indicate that she belongs to him. She's his possession, just like his horse, his hat and his handgun. Her name, or lack of, is a symbol of male oppression in 1930s America. In that time, women were seen as second-class citizens and only seen fit for reproduction or looking after the men. Perhaps Steinbeck has also left her nameless so we can associate her with all Lenny's soft things. Everything that Lenny likes is soft and then turns into disaster. This means it could be argued that the fact that she is nameless is foreshadowing her death. So the fact that she's got no name, I've given basically 3 reasons. 1, she's Curley's property. 2, that's how women were seen in 1930s, either as mothers, wives or sex objects. And number 3, I've done a high level answer where I've noticed that all the things that Lenny touches are soft. Everything that he likes to touch ends up dead or in trouble. So I've said the fact that they're all nameless and Curley's wife nameless, maybe we could tie those in. Next paragraph. Curley's wife gives the impression she's a floozy or a sex object throughout the novel. When we first see her body language is deliberately provocative when she leans against a pole in the barn, so her body was thrown forward. Being an attractive younger girl and being the only female, this suggestive posture reveals her needs to be noticed and admired by the men. Thrown is a powerful verb that suggests she fully intends to show her body off and attract male attention. She pretends to be looking for her husband, and when she's told he's not there, she writes, "If he ain't, I guess I better look someplace else," she said playfully. This suggests they're bored of being married and she just wants company and fun. Steinbeck uses the adverb playfully to present her as a young teenager and imply to the reader that she obviously cares more about throwing her body towards people and enjoying male company than she does spending time with her husband. So in that quote, I've done a few things that are quite important. One is that we've zoomed in on the word on the quote. So I've zoomed in on the word thrown and talked about what it suggests. I've also zoomed in on playfully, an adverb. Talking about adverbs and zooming in on keywords is going to get you good grades. So then I basically explained why Steinbeck has used playfully. Steinbeck could have used the word, could have just said she said, but he's used playfully, he's put that adverb in there for a reason. So try to explain why he's decided to choose that word. Okay, another point. The reader has an unfair view of Curley's wife before her first appearance. Candy says, "Well, I think Curley's married a tart." As the reader has not met Curley's wife yet, this sexual term influences the reader to think Curley's wife is sexual, a cheat and untrustworthy. One thing that might count in her favour is that Candy uses the verb think to show he is not 100% sure of this. The ellipsis, so the 3 little dots, could suggest that this is a secret as Candy pauses and or hesitates before saying tart. Candy is a guide to George and Lenny, but he's also a guide to the reader and introduces the characters to the reader. With this, he also introduces how Steinbeck wants us to think of these characters. Candy is a lonely man on a ranch in 1930s America. As he doesn't have a family, he doesn't have anyone else to talk to, and as that time in society, the elderly and disabled were left with no support. This may explain why he's so eager to share gossip with the new workers. We are shown she is a threat to the men with the colour red. She makes her first entrance with full rouged lips, red mules, red ostrich feathers, and her fingernails were red. She must just enjoy wearing the colour, but it may indicate danger towards George, and especially Lenny, as the reader has already been told about the incident with the girl in weed. As a result, the colour symbolises danger, and therefore it foreshadows there might be trouble ahead for our two main characters. We already know that we've talked in class that red is a warning sign, so this explosion of red on the page is a warning sign to George and Lenny there's going to be trouble. As the colour red can also denote blood, perhaps Steinbeck is warning the reader that she might have blood on her hands. So Candy's wife fingernails, Curley's wife may end up with blood on her hand, i.e. causing bloodshed. The cotton dress is also a reminder of weed, and the reader knows that trouble arises when Lenny touches soft things. In this part of the novella, Curley's wife's appearance is described for the first time, and her hair is described as styled like little rolled clusters like sausages. Even though Curley's wife is trying to come across as a sexual woman, she is described as having a child's haircut with the rolled clusters. Steinbeck uses a simile with comparing it to sausages, suggesting that all the men see her as a piece of meat. This links back to 1930s America, where women were either seen as sex objects or mothers. She is also described as having wide-spaced eyes, which suggests that Curley's wife is still young and innocent, while heavily made up could suggest that she's trying to hide that innocence to look more mature. You could also add a lot more with the heavily made up, so you could be saying that she's trying to get the attention of the men, you could be saying she's trying to look older. Remember, she's only 17 or 18, so maybe you could be saying that she's using it to cover up acne or blemishes on her skin. A higher level point could be that Curley is known as being a boxer, a violent man. He's got a temper, so maybe you could even imply or suggest that Steinbeck uses a lot of makeup on Curley's wife. Maybe she's covering up a black eye, maybe she's been a victim of domestic abuse. Curley's wife shows her cruel side to a number of the characters in chapter 4. Well, you keep your place then, nigger. I could get you strung up on a tree so easy it ain't even funny. Curley's wife is suggesting she'll get Crooks lynched if he continues talking to her. In the 1930s, black men would have been hanged from a tree if they were accused of a crime. There would have been no judge or jury, but they would have been just killed on a white person's accusation. They were hung from a tree as a punishment, but also as a warning to other people. And now, and I'm going to zoom in on my quote, the so easy phrasing makes it sound like she could make it happen as easily as breathing in and out, while the keep your place suggests she wants him never to get his place in society and the ranch as a black man. She also calls him a nigger, and while this might not be considered racist in 1930s America, we sense she uses it as an insult. This might give her some status and power. Despite being married to a man on the ranch, she's actually an outcast just because she's a woman and none of the men want to talk to her. Nobody will want to converse with her because they fear her husband and because they would automatically tar her with the same brush as they had him, which is to be extremely unreasonable and disrespectful, not to mention rude and unfriendly. Like many of the characters in the novel, Curley's wife also has a dream. So we talked about this in class. So George and Letty want to have the house. She wants to be an actress. Curley wants to be a boxer. Many women had this dream similar to this as they thought about the excitement that would follow. Although even in Steinbeck's cruel world it is made clear that dreams are only dreams, and the shatter of hope is clearly inevitable, even with delicate people such as Curley's wife. Perhaps Steinbeck uses the adjective brittle to describe her voice to symbolise that Curley's wife dreams and perhaps the character is brittle and it will shatter before the story ends. He's also making a comment on 1930s America and the American dream. We've already talked about what the title means, and basically he says that everything happens is fate and that Steinbeck doesn't believe in the American dream. It could also be argued that her dream disappearing is foreshadowed in the second chapter with a description of her appearance. The character constantly wears ostrich feathers, which is clearly a case of her trying to emulate the film actresses of the 1930s, who sometimes wore ostrich feathers around their necks. However, the side effect is not achieved as Curley's wife only wears them on her red mules. This can be linked to 1930s America and the Depression, which meant that this is all she could afford. Steinbeck uses the fact that ostriches are a bird that can't fly as a metaphor to show the reader that Curley's wife can't fly. This may imply she will never leave the ranch or retrieve her dreams. So we've talked about that ostriches are a bird that can't fly. In a lot of ways, Curley's wife is a bird that can't fly. She has all these dreams, however, she won't be able to get out of the ranch. She's stuck where she is. Steinbeck uses the light and dark to show a problem for the men. As Curley's wife is first introduced, a rectangle of sunshine and the doorway was cut off. Sunshine and light can be seen to represent hopes, dreams and life. Curley's wife blocks the light later in the story, destroys their hopes of having their own farm. It's a metaphor. The words cut off could indicate the action will be abrupt and fast. This is also a clear warning to the reader that this character is dangerous. It also adds to the sexist attitude at the time that a young and attractive girl is only trying to get a guy into trouble. So going back to the words cut off again I'm zooming in on language. Steinbeck could have put the light in the doorway faded, but using cut off it sounds like brutal, it sounds quick, that Curley's wife could do it, could shatter this dream with a click of her fingers. Chapter 5 shows Curley's wife as more of a human character. The reader is presented with a different side to this seemingly flirtatious, sometimes malicious character. In this chapter, Steinbeck allows Curley's wife character to articulate her feelings of loneliness by telling Loney that I get lonely and I get awful lonely. This use of repetition emphasises her isolation and frustration at her not being able to talk to nobody but Curley, and it is this frustration which continues surfaces as she speaks to Lenny. The use of the adjective awful perhaps shows the reader the depth of her isolation and a need for attention. The narrator explains that her words tumble down in a passion of communication, as though she hurried before her listener could be taken away. The word tumble suggests how her need to talk is so desperate, while the word passionate illustrates the power and intensity of this need to communicate. Steinbeck has shown the real person in this chapter, and the use of the adverbs consoled, soothingly, and in chapter 5 indicate that she has a sensitive, understanding side which neither has not seen thus far. You could also add to that it's almost like a maternal thing. The fact that she spoke soothingly suggests she has a kind nature, as soothing is like trying to remedy someone's pain, and acts in a maternal way when Lenny needed such gentleness. So actually, when someone shows her a bit of kindness, she shows kindness back, and we see a motherly side to her. Curley's wife is presented as having a dreadful relationship with her husband. One such way is to suggest that he only sees her as a sex object. Candy suggests this when he says, "That glove's full of Vaseline." Candy says this about Curley when Curley leaves the barn to explain what kind of character Curley is to George and Lenny. This explains that to Curley his wife is both a sexual object and a possession. He is keeping his hands soft so he can use it when caressing her. It could even be read that he's keeping it soft to beat her with. In particular, the word fuller suggests that he takes the task of keeping his hands off very seriously. It could tell the reader that Curley prizes and considers her to be worth this effort, so it may suggest that he actually does love her. However, it could be another example of being treated as a trophy, and that Curley is using the glove to show the other men how masculine he is. One part of the novel makes you sympathise with Curley's wife is when she dies. As her dead body is lying in the hay, the meanness and the planning and the discontent and the ache for attention were all gone from her face. This is an excellent summary of her, and it shows that after all the stress and things life has placed on her, she's finally relaxed and is at ease, and perhaps Steinbeck is saying that she's better off now, away from the meanness and the discontent, and perhaps the ranch was no place for a woman. However, as Lenny also covered a dead body in hay, the reader could argue that again she's been treated as low as an animal. The narrator eulogises, so like a funeral we have a eulogy, for the reader as no other character speak for her. After her death, a moment settled and hovered and remained for much more than a moment. Sound and movement stopped for much more than a moment. This is almost Steinbeck praying for her, and it gives the character a moment, and it's also the moment where the dream dies for everyone. The sound and the movement stop implies that everyone's dream is broken in this moment. So the moment Curley's wife dies, the dream ends for everyone. So it ends for Candy, he's not going to be with George and Lenny. It ends for George and Lenny, it ends for Curley's wife. So the moment she dies, the dream stops for everyone. Could also say, it's actually a bit of a sad point, that the only time that someone speaks, gives her a compliment or in a nice way, in a positive light, is when she dies. And that shows how poorly the character is treated. Steinbeck uses the personification of time to emphasise the effect of Curley's wife's death on the ranch. He refers to time as something that awakened again and moved sluggishly on. This image suggests that the time doesn't stand still, and that even for a person has died, life goes on. The author is also telling us that everyone's dreams have died, and the adverb sluggishly implies that without dreams, life will be tiresome and harder to get through. So remember, personification is something that you're giving something that's not human emotion. So it's saying that time moves on slowly. So time has woken up and moves on slowly. So time stopped a little bit when Curly's wife died, but then life goes on. In conclusion, our perception of Curly's wife changes throughout the story. At first we see her as a trouble who flirts with other ranch hands. As the story goes forward, Steinbeck shows how she is unhappy with her life. It also shows her to be just as vulnerable as other characters. She shares her dreams, which also shares her loneliness. Therefore, Curly's wife is just as lonely as the other characters. So I've gone back to my exam title, talking about we think she's to blame a little bit, and just basically summarising our main points. So that's it for the A grade essay. Have a look at my annotations on BBC WordPress. Even though this is 2,242 words, quite a bit more than your word count, there's so much more we could add. We could have gone into detail more about her being heavily made up. We could go into detail more about her talking about her dreams, how she talks about her dreams always in the past tense, which may suggest to the reader that she knows they're not going to happen. We could have talked about a lot more, but still we've got quite a lot in that A grade essay. Remember, simple point, give evidence, then zoom in on key words and elaborate. Okay. Any questions, drop me an email. Thanks.